There was a smell I recognized the moment I stepped through the front door. Not food. Not the usual mix of laundry detergent and the vanilla candle my wife always kept on the kitchen counter. Something else. Something that took me 3 seconds to place, and when I placed it, my stomach dropped through the floor. Infection. The kind you smell in a field hospital after a bad week. Sweet and rotten and wrong in a way that doesn't belong anywhere near a house with a backyard and a swing set. I'd landed at Dulles 4 hours earlier than scheduled. The mission in Kandahar had wrapped early. Communication breakdown on the other side, not ours. And my CO gave us the option to head home. I didn't even change out of my civilian travel clothes before I was in a cab. 17 months. I'd missed my daughter's first day of middle school, her birthday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the science fair she'd been building a project for since September. I had a stuffed bear in my bag that I'd bought in the Frankfurt airport during a layover. She was 12. I didn't care she was too old for it. I was buying it anyway. The house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. My wife, I'll call her by what she was at that point, which was still my wife, came out of the hallway fast when she heard the door. Too fast. Like she'd been listening for it. "You're early," she said. "Not welcome home. Not I missed you. Just, you're early." "Flight changed," I said. I was already reading her face. 11 years in Army intelligence teaches you to read faces whether you want to or not. Hers was doing something complicated, relieved and terrified at the same time, which is a combination that doesn't make sense unless someone is managing a situation they didn't expect to have to manage yet. "Where's Aubrey?" I asked. "She's resting. She's sick? She fell at her friend's house. Her back's a little sore. She's fine." The smell was stronger near the hallway. I moved toward it. My wife stepped in front of me. Not dramatically. Just a half step, the way you step in front of something you don't want someone to see. I noticed. She knew. I noticed. "She's sleeping, Nolan. Don't wake her." I looked at her for a long moment, then I went around her. Aubrey's room was at the end of the hall. The door was cracked. I pushed it open slowly, the way you do when a kid is sleeping, and I stood in the doorway for a second, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light. She was on her side, facing the wall. Her breathing was fast and shallow. The room was warm, too warm, and the smell in there hit me like a wall. I walked to her bed and sat on the edge and put my hand on her shoulder gently. "Bug," I said. That's what I called her since she was 3 years old and wouldn't stop collecting roly-poly bugs from a garden. "Hey, it's Dad." She stirred, turned slightly toward me, and I saw her face. Her skin was gray. There was sweat at her hairline. Her lips were dry and cracked. Her eyes opened halfway, and she looked at me with an expression I will never forget as long as I live. It was relief, pure and complete, the way a person looks when they've been waiting for someone to come, and no one came for a very long time. "Daddy," she whispered. I pulled back the edge of her blanket, just the edge, just to look. There was a bandage on her lower left side wrapped around her torso. The gauze had bled through, not bright red, but the dark rust color of old blood mixed with something else. The skin around the edges of the dressing was red and hot-looking even from where I sat. I'm trained not to react. 11 years of that kind of training runs deep. I kept my face still. I kept my voice level. "Who did this?" I said. Not a question. A sentence. My wife was standing in the doorway. I didn't turn around. I just waited. "She needed a procedure," she finally said. "It was planned. Everything is fine. The gauze is soaked through. She has a fever." "What procedure?" Silence. I turned around then. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and I saw something I'd never seen in her face before in 13 years of knowing her. Guilt, yes. Fear, yes. But underneath that, something colder. The look of someone who had already made a calculation and was now waiting to see if the math still worked. "What procedure?" I said again. She didn't answer. I took my phone out and called 911. She grabbed my arm. "Don't," she said. "Nolan, don't. I can explain. You can explain to the paramedics." She grabbed harder. "If you call, it comes out. All of it comes out, and I need you to listen to me first. Please, just 5 minutes." I looked at my daughter. Her eyes were half open. Her breathing hadn't changed. I called 911, gave them the address, told them I had a 12-year-old with signs of post-surgical infection and to send an ambulance. Then I hung up and looked at my wife. "You've got 4 minutes," I said. "Talk." She'd been carrying a debt I didn't know about. Not household debt. Not a credit card she'd overspent on. A private debt, the kind that doesn't show up on any joint account. the kind that accumulates when a person has been making decisions in the dark for years. It had started, she said, before Aubrey was born. Before we were even married. A medical study. She'd been a participant in a longitudinal health study run through a private research foundation connected to a hospital group called Meridian Health Partners. Not a hospital most people had heard of, but real, licensed, operating in 3 states. She'd signed consent forms. She'd been paid. She'd consented to long-term monitoring of a genetic marker associated with kidney function that was rare in the general population but showed up in her bloodline. After Aubrey was born, they'd tested the baby as part of the follow-up protocol. Standard, they told her, parental consent for pediatric participants in existing family cohorts. Aubrey had the marker too. For years, nothing happened. They sent follow-up surveys, did occasional blood draws at annual checkups. My wife thought it was all above board. Then 18 months ago, right around when my deployment orders came through, a man named Dr. Vance Holbrook reached out. He wasn't just a researcher. He was also the lead transplant surgeon for a private network of clients my wife described in the language she used as people with resources. He explained that Aubrey's tissue type, combined with her genetic profile, made her a match for a recipient who had been waiting for years, someone whose family had contributed significantly to Meridian's research funding. He made an offer. My wife said she needed time to think. She thought about it for 6 weeks. 6 weeks while I was in Kandahar thinking about the stuffed bear I was going to put in my kid's hands the moment I got home. She said yes. The surgery had been performed 11 days ago, outpatient, at a private facility, under the cover of a minor abdominal procedure that she told the school required Aubrey to take 2 weeks off for recovery. She told Aubrey it was a procedure to remove a cyst. Aubrey had been sedated. She'd come home with a prescription for painkillers and instructions she couldn't fully follow because she was 12 years old, and there was no one in that house making sure she followed them. The infection had started 5 days in. My wife had called Holbrook. Holbrook had sent a nurse twice. The nurse had changed the dressing and told my wife to keep giving Aubrey the antibiotics and that the infection was normal and would resolve. It had not resolved. I heard all of this in the 4 minutes before the ambulance arrived. I heard it the way you hear things in the field when there's no time to feel them, filing each piece, noting it, storing it for later. Then the paramedics were at the door and I was walking them to my daughter's room and I was answering their questions clearly and calmly and I was watching them work. And when they put her on the stretcher and she reached for my hand, I held it all the way to the ambulance and I did not let go. The ER doctor who took Aubrey's case was a woman named Dr. Young, and she didn't hedge or soften anything. Post-surgical wound infection, significant. Early-stage septicemia. One kidney recently removed, she said it with no expression, just stated it as a fact, looking at me to see if I already knew. I nodded. She said they needed to start IV antibiotics immediately, and that Aubrey was going to need close monitoring for the next 48 hours. She said the word serious. She said the word treatable. She said them in that order, and I understood what she was telling me. I sat in the chair next to Aubrey's bed in the ER, and I held my daughter's hand, and I talked to her in the low voice I used when she was small and couldn't sleep, the one that was barely above a murmur. And I told her I was here and I wasn't going anywhere, and she was going to be okay. She was in and out. The fever was still high. But somewhere around the 3rd hour, she squeezed my hand and said, "I knew you'd come home." And I had to look at the ceiling for about 30 seconds before I could answer her. My wife was in the waiting room. I didn't speak to her. A detective from the county came to the hospital that night. A man named Sergeant Oliver, patient, methodical. The kind of cop who takes notes by hand and makes eye contact the whole time you're talking. I told him everything my wife had told me. He listened. He asked good questions. He told me that what I was describing, the paid removal of a minor's organ for transplant without the consent of a legal guardian under fraudulent medical cover, was a federal crime and that he was going to make a call. He made the call. I listened to him make it. Then he asked me where my wife was. I pointed toward the waiting room. He walked that direction. I went back to my daughter's room. I need to tell you something about Vance Holbrook before I tell you what happened next. He wasn't some back alley operator. He had a curriculum vitae that went on for 4 pages. Johns Hopkins Medical School. Residency at UCSF. Board-certified transplant surgeon with credentials from 3 different specialty associations. He lectured at conferences. He published in peer-reviewed journals. He sat on the ethics committee, I'm not making that up, of the same hospital group that ran Meridian Health Partners. His private practice had a waiting room with leather chairs and a receptionist who called patients by their first name. He drove a car that cost more than most people's houses. He had a wife and 3 kids in Bethesda and a beach house in the Outer Banks that he posted pictures of on LinkedIn. He'd also, in the past 7 years, performed at least 11 off-book organ procurement procedures on minors. I know that number because I spent 3 weeks finding it out after Aubrey came home from the hospital. I need to explain how I found it, because it matters. I spent 11 years doing intelligence work for the U.S. Army. Some of that work was the kind you can describe at a dinner party: logistics analysis, communications interception, threat assessment. Some of it was not. When I left the Army, I took a position with a private security and intelligence firm that contracted primarily with federal agencies. I had clearances I'm not going to specify here, and I had a set of skills that aren't listed on any resume, but that are very real and very applicable to situations that require finding the truth about something someone has worked very hard to hide. 3 weeks after Aubrey was discharged from the hospital, I had a file on Vance Holbrook that was 47 pages long. I had the names of his other patients. I had the name of the shell company that processed the payments, a healthcare consulting LLC registered in Delaware that hadn't filed a legitimate tax return in 4 years. I had records of 14 wire transfers totaling just under $800,000. I had the name of the recipient of Aubrey's kidney, a 63-year-old man in McLean, Virginia, whose family had donated $2.3 million to Meridian's Research Foundation over the previous 5 years. I had the name of the referral attorney who had brokered the arrangement between Holbrook and my wife. I had text messages, because people who think they're untouchable don't bother to encrypt their text messages, and because I know how to get text messages from phones that haven't been voluntarily surrendered. I had everything, and here is the thing about having everything: it gives you choices that most people don't have. I could have handed it to the FBI and waited, watched the process work at the speed the process works, which is slow and which produces results that are real but incomplete, and which would have required Aubrey to testify, repeatedly, about what had been done to her body without her knowledge or consent in rooms full of strangers. I did hand it to the FBI, every page of it. I had a meeting with 2 agents from the Baltimore field office, and I put the file on the table, and I walked them through it for 4 hours. But before I did that, I did something else. Holbrook's office was in a medical building off Connecticut Avenue, Nathwan, 8th floor. His last appointment on the Thursday ended at 5:30. His car was in the garage on the 2nd level. He walked the same route every evening: elevator to parking garage, 2nd level, northeast corner, black Mercedes. I was standing next to his car when he walked up. He recognized me. He'd been told about me. I could see it in his face, the way a person looks when they've thought about a scenario and now the scenario is happening. He started to reach for his phone. "I wouldn't," I said. He stopped. "I want to be precise about what happened next, because I've thought about it a lot in the time since, and I want to be precise about what I did and what I didn't do. I didn't touch him. I didn't threaten him physically. I stood between him and his car, and I looked at him and I said, I have everything. Every transfer, every patient, every message you sent and received going back to 2018. The FBI has a copy of the file. So does a journalist at the Washington Post who has agreed to hold publication for 30 days while federal investigators confirm what they're looking at. Today is day 26. He said nothing. His face had gone completely flat. You are going to surrender your medical license before you are suspended. You're going to do it Monday morning, voluntarily. And when you do it, you're going to notify your board chair in writing that you are cooperating fully with an ongoing federal investigation. You're going to do this because if you lawyer up and fight and drag this out, I will make sure that every family whose child you operated on knows your name, your address, your children's school, and the full contents of that file. Not through the journalist. Through me, directly. I let that sit for a moment. My daughter is 12 years old, I said. She had 1 kidney removed from her body while she was unconscious, and she was told it was a cyst removal, and she is never going to get that kidney back. You understand what you took from her? Not just tissue. You understand what you took. He was very still. I'm not here to hurt you, I said. An eye for an eye is too easy for a man like you. I want you to watch everything you build come apart in a way you can't stop and can't explain to your wife or your colleagues or your children. I want you to feel what helpless feels like. That's what I came here to tell you. I stepped aside. I let him get in his car. He surrendered his license on Monday. The federal case took 14 months to fully develop. Holbrook pled guilty to 4 federal charges, including conspiracy to commit organ trafficking and fraud. He was sentenced to 19 years. The Delaware LLC was dissolved. The McLean family's $2.3 million in donations was clawed back as proceeds of a criminal enterprise and directed to a victims fund established by the court. The referral attorney, a man named Barfield, if you want his name because he deserves to have his name said out loud, was disbarred and sentenced to 6 years. My wife pled guilty to criminal facilitation of organ trafficking and conspiracy. She was sentenced to 12 years. I watched the sentencing from a seat in the courtroom behind the prosecutor's table, and I felt nothing almost. A kind of complete stillness, like the end of something that had been too loud for too long. Aubrey was in school that day. I had not told her about the sentencing date. She had a geography test and a lunch with her best friend, and those things mattered more than watching her mother's fate get read aloud in a courtroom. Aubrey turned 13 4 months after the case closed. I was there. I made her the chocolate cake with the strawberry frosting she'd been requesting since she was 7, and I'd always been deployed for. We ate it at the kitchen table, just the two of us. And she told me about the book she was reading and a fight she'd had with her friend that had been resolved and a song she wanted me to listen to. She laughed twice, hard enough to put her hand over her mouth. She looked healthy. Her color was good. Her doctors had cleared her for all normal activity. She'd adapted well, they said. People live full lives with one kidney, they reminded me, as if I needed reminding. I'd memorized everything there was to know about living with one kidney in the 3 days after Aubrey's surgery, lying on a cot in a hospital waiting room, reading on my phone. Before she went to bed that night, she stopped in the doorway and looked back at me. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, bug. I'm glad you came home early." I nodded. I kept my face level the way I'm trained to do. "Me too," I said. After she went upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, not doing anything, just sitting there in the quiet house with the vanilla candle on the counter. I'd bought a new one, the same kind, because the smell of it was hers and she deserved to have it. And I thought about what a person does with something like this, where it goes, how you carry it without letting it become the only thing you carry. I don't have a clean answer to that. I'm still working on it. What I know is that she laughed twice at dinner. What I know is that her color was good and she'd finished her geography homework, and she had a friend she was happy about and a book she was excited about and a song she wanted me to hear. That's what I came home to. That's what I was fighting for. If you've been through something like this, if someone you trusted did the unthinkable to someone you love, I want you to know that the system can work, and that it works faster when someone who knows how to push it actually pushes it. Don't wait. Don't accept what you're told to accept. Document everything. Find people who are better at their jobs than the people who failed you. And don't stop. My daughter needed one kidney to make it through. She still has one. It's enough. Subscribe if you're new here. You know where to find me. People ask me sometimes, usually after I've told some version of this story, whether I regret not going further, whether standing next to Holbrook's car and talking was enough, whether I wished I'd done something that couldn't be undone. The honest answer is that I thought about it. I'd be lying if I said the thought never crossed my mind in those 3 weeks I was building that file, reading wire transfer records at 2 in the morning, while Aubrey slept down the hall. I thought about it the way you think about a lot of things, when you're running on 4 hours of sleep and rage, and the specific kind of grief that comes from realizing someone you trusted with your child's life decided that life was worth less than a wire transfer. But here's what I kept coming back to. The people who did this to Aubrey made every single decision they made because they believed no one was watching. Holbrook believed he was untouchable because he'd built a very convincing performance of legitimacy. The credentials, the ethics committee seat, the LinkedIn beach house photos. My wife believed she could make that phone call and keep it buried because I was 11 time zones away and the system around her had no reason to look. The attorney Barfield believed a Delaware LLC and careful paperwork made everything clean. Every one of them was wrong in the same way. They mistook the absence of immediate consequences for safety. They confused not getting caught yet with not being catchable. That's not a religious idea. It's just math. Every decision leaves a record somewhere. Every transaction has a counterparty. Every person who knows a secret is a variable you can't fully control. The more people you bring in to execute something, the more surface area you create for it to unravel. Holbrook had been doing this for 7 years across 3 states, and the only reason he'd gotten that far was that no one with the right combination of motive, access, and skill had pointed themselves at him yet. I was that combination. I didn't choose to be, but once I was, the outcome was pretty much determined. What I want people to take from this, especially if you're going through something where the system feels slow or broken or stacked against you, is that information is the thing. Not rage, not speed, not doing something dramatic in a parking garage that gets you arrested and hands the other side a gift. The night I stood next to Holbrook's car, I had 47 pages. That's what made him still. Not my size, or my background, or my tone of voice. The file. The fact that he knew I'd already won and was just informing him of the terms. Aubrey didn't know any of this was happening while it happened. She was going to school and doing homework and eating birthday cake and telling me about a book she was reading. That's how it should have been. Pulling her into it, making her carry the weight of what was being done on her behalf. That would have been one more thing taken from her. Some things a parent just carries alone. She's doing well. Her doctors say she'll live a completely normal life. She laughs easily, and she has good friends, and she is, in every way that matters, okay. That's the whole story. That's all of it. If you're new here, subscribe. These cases are real, and they matter, and someone needs to keep saying so.